Hello everyone, thank you to be here. Anti-heroes in the rubble. What do have in common V for Vendetta fascistic dictatorship and The Last of Us zombie apocalypse? They are both dystopias, even if of a different kind, catastrophic realities in which the societies as we know it ceases to exist. We can consider them to explore the common characteristic of a dystopic world and analyze the hero's role inside this kind of realities. If we can still talk about heroes, of course. In fact, both V created by Alan Moore and Joel and Ellie created by Naughty Dog have strong heroic qualities, but they are also forced to decisions and actions that we would define evil in a normal situation. V for Vendetta and Watchmen choice at the beginning is not random. Moore's graphic novel are two of the best examples of superheroes deconstruction and hero deconstruction as well. Through these works, it is possible to define the concept of hero and to define its role inside a dystopia. If the society collapsed and there is nothing left to save, what role does a hero have? Is it possible to be a hero in a condemned world? The answers to these questions will be confronted with the post-apocalyptic world of The Last of Us. The player in Joel and Ellie's America is also forced to immoral action to survive and go on in the game. How long can we stare into the abyss without becoming monsters ourselves? Which actions can be justified to save humanity? This question leads this analysis. Before we start, two warnings. There will be major spoiler of the quoted works, and there will be also two violent game sequences from The Last of Us. First, I want to point out the connection between a dystopic narrative and our world. A dystopia, as the name suggests, is a dystopos, a bad place. It is the contrary of the eutopos, good place. However, the term utopia, coined by Thomas More, means also an eutopos, no place. Dystopias are the opposite of the good place, but they can be an eutopos, an imaginary reality, as well as a concrete and tangible world. The utopia cannot. It cannot be reached and cannot be real without ceasing to be such. It is correct to say that dystopia presents a stronger connection with reality compared to utopia. It is possible to find numerous examples of dystopic realities in history, catastrophes, despotic states, plagues. On the contrary, the only utopic worlds are mythological. While describing dystopias, Francesco Muzzioli highlights that if we imagine an utopia, it is because the reality is already, at least in part, dystopic. In popular culture, dystopias are usually eutopos, fictive worlds, which are nonetheless highly realistic compared to utopias, in which analogies, metaphor, and similarity with our world can be found. Dystopias are absurd and unlikely worlds, but they portray the human situation somehow more realistic than the utopia, and more cynical. Even if The Last of Us zombies are clearly a fictive element, they fall often in the background in this post-apocalyptic world. They are more a metaphor and a plot device to justify a world in ruins, in which the player is forced to terrible moral choices without society safety net. To survive the dystopic nightmare, we can try and rely on the hero. Analyzing the hero in connection with the dystopic narrative is revealing. On the one side, there is a reality where good and evil are not distinguished anymore, and the world is chaotic and senseless, or, if it still has a meaning, It is distorted and corrupted. On the other side, the hero is a figure who represents the good and fight for a noble purpose. The hero, as is today intended, for example the superhero, proposes a clear distinction between good and evil, however not necessarily a definition. At the same time, the dystopia, although negative, often forces one to clash with an ambiguous reality where guilty and innocent are confused with each other. Here it is not the hero but the anti-hero who has his kingdom. It could be a mistake to confuse the story's protagonist with the hero of the story. The case of V is emblematic. It is seductive and easy to limit oneself to seeing V as the positive hero who fights against a corrupt and evil system. But this interpretation is simplistic. Seeing V and the gay folks mask as a purely positive symbol of rebellion impoverishes the complexity of the character and brings him back to the comfortable hero-villain, good-evil dichotomy. Instead, it is necessary to use a different register in dealing with characters like V or Joe and Ellie. This mask is often used as an icon, a symbol of positive rebellion in a fight against despotic power. Nevertheless, V has all the characteristics that define a terrorist. V defines himself as a villain, as the boogeyman. He is aware that his actions are morally wrong. He tortures, he kills. His methods include bombing and other terroristic techniques. These inspirational figures are also controversial, like Macbeth, Satan, and of course gay folks. V is clear about his role and himself. Why then is he usually considered a positive hero? The answer can be found in his dystopic London. This London is ruled by the North Spy Party, a fascistic organization similar to Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia. How can we, with our values, condemn this terroristic action inside this kind of society? To be a hero, we must be a villain. This challenge of our moral and values is typical of a dystopic and anti-heroic narrative. The extreme and dystopic situation forces us to challenge our moral compass and accept and even condone actions that we would usually condemn as evil and immoral. Another example of Alan Moore's graphic novel in which the hero is deconstructed and sets inside a dystopic world is Watchmen. Watchmen's characters are directly linked to the modern superhero and his mythology. Watchmen's America is maybe not yet dystopic as much as this London, but it is on the verge of a nuclear apocalypse, which is the hero's role in a society not endangered by some external menace, but which is self-destructing. Moore's heroes are completely powerless. Emblematic, Night Owl, whose helplessness in front of the imminent apocalypse becomes also sexual impotence. But even the all-powerful Dr. Manhattan cannot and have no interest in saving humanity from itself. Paradoxically, the only characters who can save the world, thus remaining faithful to the superhero's mission, is Ozymandias, who is sometimes seen as the story's villain. However, like defining V as a hero reduces the character complexity, seeing Ozymandias as a villain is equally dismissive. Ozymandias brings the superhero's mission to its extreme consequences. To save the world, even from itself, is forced to resort to the atrocity of mass murder. The absurd thing is that Ozymandias succeeds. He saves the world from the nuclear apocalypse. Can his action be justified? His atrocity condemnable in front of Armageddon, which is the difference between Ozymandias and V, who both kill to save their society from themselves. Characters like V or Ozymandias both become monsters in fighting against the evil. They are both evil, in the way Nietzsche meant the world, a challenge to the status quo and the common moral. They destroy in order to create something new, a new society, a better society. That's the meaning of Zarathustra is ein Freund der Bösen, a friend of the evils, as Nietzsche writes in Ecce Homo. Is there a difference between V and Ozymandias? Is there a difference between V and Ozymandias? Ozymandias kills innocent people, but do these victims all deserve to die and suffer? Can a person be killed to save the world? What about 2, or thousands, or millions? If life's value is immeasurable, cynical numbers cannot make a difference, and killing one person is wrong and inexcusable as killing thousands. From this point of view, there is no difference between V and Ozymandias. However, there is an essential difference in what they do after their mission are complete. V, aware of being a villain, punishes himself and chooses to die, while Ozymandias plans to rule the new world he created. V is morally saved for this choice. Like a Camusian homme révolté, he knows what is good and despite himself does evil. His world does not allow a non-violent solution, but also in this situation we cannot justify murder. Whoever is able to achieve honor in metaphysical terms because he accepts his death. To quote Camus, the rebel has only one way of reconciling himself with his act of murder, to accept his own death and sacrifice. He kills and dies so that it shall be clear that murder is impossible. His action remains morally wrong, even if there is no alternative. It is a paradox to which Homme Révolté is condemned and to which these anti-heroes are condemned as well. They find themselves dealing with a dystopian reality that prevents heroism, the impossibility of pure heroism that instead slips into a more ambiguous anti-heroism does not necessarily mean the absence of evil. Dystopia is by definition a negative, evil reality. Besides, the ambiguity of the revolt could not exist if there was not an evil to fight, as Camus notices. It is instead the good that becomes more ambiguous and uncertain. These actions are guilty, but so is London's silence as well. The citizens of London who submit without opposing the fascistic government of North Spire are also guilty, as is guilty Dr. Manhattan, who chooses to take no interest in humanity. If the rebel made no choice, he chooses the silence and slavery of the others. Silence or murder, concludes Camus. In either case, a surrender. These dystopias were despotic and totalitarian states, in which to be a hero is necessary to compromise and resort to evil actions. However, as dystopic these or Watchmen's worlds are, they are still human realities. There is still a society that imposes order and meaning to the world, regardless how much this meaning is distorted and corrupt and horrific. The good to which fight for can be uncertain and ambiguous, but it still exists. There is still the possibility to make a moral choice, even if it is always, as Camus writes, an abdication. There is still the possibility to be a sort of hero, even if controversial and anti-heroic. The dystopia of The Last of Us does not offer the same possibility. The Last of Us is a horror survival game set in a post-apocalyptic America. The dystopia is here a catastrophe. Human society is already ended, and now the world is infested with zombie-like creatures called the Infected. The Infected represent the natural and chaotic dimension, as opposed to the human one. They are indeed not supernatural creatures, living dead, but rather sick persons infected with a type of fungus. It is not entirely correct to describe this creature as evil. Like an earthquake or a hurricane, they represent a destructive natural force, chaotic and destructive, but amoral rather than immoral. Human beings are forced to fight for their survival. Against the infected, of course, but mostly against other men, for resources and shelter. There is no society to save or rebuild, but only small groups that try to stay alive. The collapsing of society means the disappearance of moral order. The question, what is good, almost completely loses its meaning. Nothing goes beyond simple survival. The names of the small armed groups formed underline these dimensions, like the wolves, the hyenas, and the rattlers. These factions are not so concerned with fighting the infected, but are in constant battle with each other, with the sole purpose of reaffirming themselves over others. In most cases, the player finds himself clashing not so much with runners and pickers, but rather with other men. How can we talk about heroes in this world without a good to fight for or a society to rebuild? What roles could he have the hero? Inside a catastrophic dystopia, to quote Muzzioli, there is no longer even a hero worthy of the name, capable of extraordinary actions, even if they are wrong. Rather, the hero becomes an unnecessarily aware observer who can do nothing to avoid the catastrophe and indeed is overwhelmed by it. The players take the role of Joel in The Last of Us 1 and of Ellie in The Last of Us 2, that lead to identifying them and identifying himself as the hero of the story. But can we define Joel and Ellie as heroes? Like Ozymandias or V, both have heroic characteristics. They are courageous, resilient, strong. However, they can also be ruthless and cynical. The Obesian Homo homini lupus rules the world of The Last of Us. Joel and Ellie kill if they have to. The only rule seems to be to kill, or to be killed, nothing else. The most significant difference between Alan Moore's anti-hero and The Last of Us protagonist is their mission. This mission, and Ozymandias, can be defined as heroic, to save the world, to save humanity. In The Last of Us, neither Joel nor Ellie have an heroic agenda. However, there is one group of survivors who wants to rebuild society and to find a cure for the fungus, the fireflies. In The Last of Us Volume 1, the player works indeed for the fireflies. As Joel, he must take the young Ellie from Boston to Salt Lake City, to the biggest fireflies bases. Ellie is the only one immune to the fungus, and so in Salt Lake the fireflies could be able to study her and find a cure. It seemed a classic heroic mission, protect the girl and find a cure to save the world. Until the end of the game, at least, when the two connected purposes, protect Ellie and find a cure, enter in conflict with each other. In order to study the fungus inside Ellie's brain, the fireflies must kill her. Joel cannot accept it. In the last game sequences, the player must make his way in the fireflies' bases, killing everyone who tried to stop him from rescuing Ellie, until he reaches the operating room, where Joel is forced to kill the surgeon, thus saving Ellie but condemning humanity's last hope. The conflict of values, typical of an anti-heroic narrative, is particularly dramatic. It is acceptable to sacrifice a young girl to save the world, like the surgeon, V or Ozymandias would probably say yes. But Joel cannot accept it. In The Last of Us Volume 2, we play as Ellie. She lives now in a small community, but her mission is not to protect it. She will abandon the small city almost immediately to seek her revenge. Her revenge is against Debbie and her companions, who, for unknown reasons, kill Joel. The player must track Debbie by searching for her friends, questioning them, torturing them, and in order to reach her revenge. The mission is not pure, but we have the impression of following a classic scheme hero-villain. However, after the first half of the game, everything changes. After the player finds Debbie, a flashback brings him years back and forces him to play as Debbie herself. We discover that the sergeant killed by Joel in The Last of Us 1 was Debbie's father, so we understand the reason for her revenge against Joel. Her revenge mirrors Ellie's. There is no difference between the two. The final boss of the game is now the main character. As Debbie, the player lives again the last 3 days until the moment of the fight. Only this time the roles are inverted, and Ellie becomes the boss fight. The player must defeat her if you want to go on with the game. During several moments of this fight, the impression that we are about to kill Ellie is strong. The only alternative would be to lose or to stop playing. The ability to distinguish between hero and villain disappears completely. Ellie's and Debbie's motives are indistinguishable, just as their methods are. However, it is not a simple question of perspective, nor a conflict of values between which to choose, albeit with difficulty. In an inhuman world dominated by the infected and chaos, on what basis is it possible to distinguish between good and evil? The two concepts do not simply become confused, but they disappear completely. The fight for survival becomes brutal, and seeking revenge or killing for survival becomes indifferent. The war remains senseless, chaotic, doomed. A war that does not allow heroes. I thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoy my presentation, and here you can find the bibliography and the quotes. Thank you again.